Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at a strategy related to a video that I watched this week from over in the UK about the compact defense. And I thought it was very interesting. It's not a defense I'm particularly familiar with. It's not something we see at all in the US. And what interested me so much about it is that, first of all, I didn't think it was particularly effective defense, but it was not a particularly effective defense in my mind that had proliferated in the UK for a number of years now. So I'm going to look at two things in this video. First, I'm going to look at the defense and how you can go about breaking it down with different plays. And the second thing I'm going to look at is how this strategy proliferated despite that, and what that kind of says about Quidditch strategy, different metas, and the fact that a strategy is never necessarily a bad thing. It's just the implementation of it that is a bad thing. So once again, please like and subscribe, and let's get into it. So this is a look at what compact defense looks like, right? It was described in their video as kind of a plus sign. So you've got your two wing defenders tucked pretty far in. I was told shoulders equal, inside shoulder equal with inside hoop, keeper at the hoops, and a point defender basically. And the idea here is that you are basically making drives completely unable to be performed, right? If he tries to drive here, everybody on the field collapses, and he runs into a lot of problems. But for me, I think zones need to check more boxes, right? So I grade zones on a few things, and we'll kind of talk through them and then kind of show examples. So the first is, how does it do against shots, right? Because really the reason you're in a zone is because if you're in a man defense, you have one person guarding the hoops, and there's three hoops, and a lot of times you can shoot. And the answer is, hypothetically, right, it should be good, right? Because these players are supposed to be able to cover these outside hoops, and because of that, the keeper gets the middle hoop. You've got one person per hoop. It's almost like a glorified hoop zone, right? A glorified Baylor zone. In practice, it doesn't really work out like that, and we're going to get into why a little bit further on in terms of when we start talking about attacking it. So I don't love it. I don't think it's one of the best shot defenses. Second thing is, how does the zone handle dangerous spots on the field, right? So we consider kind of the driving lane a dangerous spot on the field, so it handles that well. It handles the back side of the hoops horribly, right? There's nobody back here. I would be even more concerned, never mind like what it does with this one person wandering who can just get hit by a pass. We'll talk about that in a second. But what if we just, run a box against this defense instead? Give that guy the quaffle. One down here, one out here. So now the second you zip this quaffle back here, right? Now, unless this defense has perfect rotations, because I think hypothetically it's supposed to be, at that point it would look something like this, based on what I'm understanding the defense to rotate towards. I mean, just look at all of this space on the field, like zip here, go here, this player can cut, this player can cut, that player can cut. So it does a really bad job of defending this back area. And kind of the reason for that is that because it's kind of covering the wings by having those players play a little bit in more of a diamond than a square as like your standard 2-2 defense. But it doesn't cover the wings very wide, right? You can still swing it out there. And the wings aren't really dangerous places to attack, right? You can't score from the wing. They're good for attacking through a lot of zones, but less so in terms of what you could actually do to immediately score off of them. So let's look at some of the ways you could attack this zone. I just want to highlight real fast that, as we were saying, the rotation is when the ball goes to the wing here, you basically just move the plus to, I guess he needs to come up a little further, to the wing, so you still have those two options so that this player can't drive any more than the other player could. Let's talk about the ways we can attack this, right? Easiest one here. We were talking about this defense is good at blocking shots, right? This point defender defends high. Every time I've seen someone run compact, this point defender's not sitting at the edge of the keeper zone. They're sitting out here. So as basic as it comes, what happens if you just tap beat this player, right? There has to be a step. It has to come from one of these two wings. The second that step happens, you should have a shooting lane, right? This player is no longer capable. You can even draw the contact and shoot. If you're timely on it and they're a little late reacting, the shooting lane's going to be open a lot of the time. Sure, hypothetically, everyone could adjust perfectly. The keeper could step this way, and this person could come a little narrower. But, I mean, every zone can be solved if you have perfect rotations, but we want to minimize the necessity of perfect rotation. So, first way you can attack it, simple. point beat, and shoot when they make the rotation. And I think this is kind of important concept in that compare this to a 2-2. So like, why would this not work as well against like a standard 2-2 zone? You tap beat this player, and all that's changed is the player who's up here is going to move over to cut off this angle. So let's see. So this beater's still going back to hoops. This guy's just going to come down, right? Cut off this angle. And then these two are still at the hoops. So the shots still aren't there. The shots were never opened at any point because you still have two people guarding the hoops. Whereas you had a keeper on the middle with a lot of responsibilities. They're technically responsible for the person back behind the hoops in this zone as well. They get caught flat-footed sometimes. You can just uncork a shot. Second way you can attack this zone is basically, so this could be because this guy got tap beat, or it could just be that you rounded the corner on them a little bit. The whole point of this zone is when you round this corner, this person's supposed to start edging up to kind of be a help defender. The second this person edges and you just flip the ball out to the wing here, this person's unmarked in a really dangerous area right here. And like I said, it's not dangerous because you can immediately score, because you can't immediately score from this spot. It's even with the hoops, there's no shot. But he can wheel around, which is a tough spot for a beater to make a play, and just kind of go for a dunk on this keeper if the beater can't get him. Or they can drive around, and at this point, there's no answer for this person because this keeper's in an impossible decision. They either have to step out here to make a hit and make a stop, or they need to stay flat to cover this pass and you make a shot. And again, maybe you could rotate this person back, but that's a real complexity in the zone again. So this just showing why this whole play doesn't work against 2-2 in the same way, kind of this more square look. First of all, there's a chance that if you throw this pass too narrow, that this player just comes out and picks it off because they're reading your eyes the whole time. Their only responsibility is reading your eyes. So let's say right off the bat, you now need to throw this pass all the way out here. So that's already a less efficient play. Then, as that ball gets thrown out there, this player is going to get to take the nice, easy route in to still cut this off. Sometimes you don't even have to have this person step out. Worst case, this person does have to step out. Even if they have to step out, you already have somebody at the hoops who can now cover up this pass. So maybe you can throw this long pass to a cutter over here. That's a lot harder pass, and this person should have floated down at some point. So the 2-2 just eats up this concept a lot better as well. Concepts can get even simpler than that, right? Because not every defender in a defense is equal. And this defense is kind of expecting that every one of these three people up in your plus can make these hits. So let's say you just swing it to the weakest defender of these three people, right? This isn't an incisive pass. This is a flat pass. You just flip it out to this person. Remember, this defender has to be basically shoulder even with the hoop, so you can get it pretty close in with this. This person starts walking in. So there's two things this person could do. One, they could just start walking in and make these two players make perfect decisions. This player has to decide to kind of go out, and this keeper needs to be watching any passes. But this player could even come out here, right? And now this keeper could never defend that pass. And now we're attacking really, really dangerously right at the hoops. Second thing is they could just take this player on, beat them, so now they're past them in the lane. Now they're drawing all kinds of attention to the keeper, the other defenders, and now they can flip this to this wide open player. And then finally, I mean, as simple as this one looks, and this one should just work against so few defenses that it really talks to how questionable the compact defense is here. You can just load up and fire a pass to somebody standing way behind the hoops back here, and they can catch it. And they can take 2 steps and shoot. Now, the issue here is that the keeper, we said the keeper's responsibility is the player behind. So they have to step out to this player, or they can just walk in, and dunk. If they're stepping out and these two players are falling back, they're useless until they get past the hoops, right? Because if they block through the hoops, it's a goaltending, the goal still stands. So they're completely useless until they get back to that point. And even if they get to that point before this player can do anything, you've so overcommitted this player. You have 1, 2, 3 players behind the hoops that all he has to do is fire it out to this wing here, and now you have the whole team is back here, right? He's got the ball here, and he's got multiple people who can cut wherever they want to cut to be open for goal. So basically the whole team has to overcommit to this pass behind. Again, this is different than how a 2-2 runs it. In a 2-2, if you pass it all the way behind like this, first of all, the second the ball's in the air, the one player at the hoops is going to sprint out there, and they're going to be an immediate point defender. The other player at the hoops is going to be already guarding the hoops. So you still have somebody who's crashing who can put a hand up on this side so that you can't shoot at this hoop. And then you have the player guarding the other two hoops, and there's no immediate shot, right? Meanwhile, you're also supposed to have a second player crashing to eventually guard the hoops so that you can really seal things up. So let's say something goes wrong here, you get by the point defender, etc. Sure, you can pass out here still, but if you pass out there, let's see, this player's here now, this player's here, this player's floating in, you still have better defensive setup, right? This player can start moving their way back in, this player can start working their way back at there, and you can reset up your 2-2. You're not overcommitted 3 people all the way back behind the hoops. So now we're going to see some of those examples put into action for attacking this zone. And the first one is just the fact that maybe this zone's not quite as effective at taking care of shots as you'd think. And it's because while, yes, this 1, 2, 3 players are guarding these hoops, they all have responsibilities. You can see this player is looking out this way. So if a shot zipped to that hoop right now, he wouldn't see it. This keeper you're going to see in a second is going to get the responsibility drawn of noticing that there's a potentially dangerous... I don't know if you saw it. He basically took this one step back and almost turned his head because he saw that there was a potentially dangerous pass there. So now he's flat-footed. Everybody else is kind of out of position. Again, this player's just turning his head back. Look at the shot that's going to go in on this play. I mean, for all I know, that was a pass. But regardless, the point is, it was a lob shot to the top hoop from maybe 10 yards. And it didn't hit the top of the hoop. It kind of just made its way right in. So that's kind of the issues there where, yes, there's 3 people guarding 3 hoops, but they all have extra responsibilities, and that makes it more dangerous than it otherwise would be. So the next one we're going to see is the way you can just use a pass to the wing to create problems for the defense in the same way. We were talking about the wing all the way to the back. So this ball is going to swing to the left wing. You can see the setup again. You have the 1, 2, 3 defenders. And I mean, this is free, right? She's never supposed to be out that far. She's doing nothing wrong. She's supposed to stay close to the defense. And now look at the impossible situation that's going to be created. Now, maybe this keeper is supposed to step slightly further out, but they're not supposed to step back. They're supposed to just be a help defender on the right wing. This defender gets put into an impossible position. Her job is to step up and defend this, but now she's leaving this pass wide open. All she does is wait. And I mean, this is not that hard of a pass. This is a lob pass back behind. And now look at how out of position the entire defense is. They're trying to crash last second, but he's going to get this ball and have options to shoot. Everyone's trying to get hands up, but again, I mean, the options are there. She's making the perfect cut to this far hoop. She might even be open for a pass once she gets around this corner. I don't think he's ever going to see her, but I mean, he could have just dished to her and she'd catch and release right through that hoop. Instead, he's just going to go in and take it himself. And that's just too easy. I mean, those passes weren't precision, right? Like, she kind of lobbed that ball back there, the first pass out to her, but these passes aren't covered, and there's no good switches to them, so they're able to make them pay for these. All right, so this is the big one, the one that we were really saying should be a no-no for any defense to struggle with, any zone defense specifically. The pass behind the hoops. So this is going to happen kind of off screen, but it was a really good example of it, so I wanted to show it anyway. All right. So let's see what's happening. So the player who was at the hoops crashed as they were supposed to as the ball got there. And really the beaters crashed. Like, everyone's crashing. Nobody's making an incorrect play, but there's nobody to cover these hoops because these players started too far out. And maybe their reaction time was a little slow, and maybe they were supposed to be a little close to the hoops. But regardless, I mean, these are the 2 people responsible for covering these 3 hoops, and they're still probably 5 yards away from it, and the player already has the ball. And you can see, I mean, maybe he's ducking this beat. Regardless, he's going to have the world's easiest shot. All he did is wait for the defender to come out and make the hit so he couldn't block the shot anymore. And that's just the world's easiest shot in this hoop. And the 2 possible people who are supposed to be guarding the hoops are still 3 yards away from it. And it's going to slip right through. I mean, for a zone defense to not have a better response to that specific play is a real problem. And finally, we're just going to look at how you go about just attacking with a mismatch on the wing here. So ball's going to get swung out to the wing again. And this is just going to be a mismatch. And this wing chaser is just going to be able to go right through. And at this point, everything starts to go to heck with this defense, right? He gets into the lane, and people have to step. basically just draws out as much defensive coverage as possible as his teammate just, again, because the backside of the hoops is always undefended on this defense, just kind of makes their way in. And look at all of the collapsing, because that's the only thing they can do. They don't have a rotation to anywhere else. All they can do is collapse on this driver. And that is the easiest pass and goal you will ever get in your life. So now you're probably thinking, so Ethan, you just showed all these ways that this zone defense doesn't really work well, so why is it being brought up on a UK video stream about the basics? Why was it being played to such prominence in that country? And I was talking with Jay Holmes, the coach of Team UK, about this, and it kind of helped me get to a point that I thought was really important. And I'm calling it the two metagame theory. And basically what the saying is that at any given time in our sport, there's not just a metagame, right? Like, we're not in the 2-2 zone meta, perhaps, in the US as much as I talk about it. College is in the 2-2 zone meta, but club teams are playing a lot of different zones and a lot of man defense still. So you've got the elite metagame and the novice metagame. And I don't say novice to be mean to anybody, it's just teams with less experience, basically. So in the elite metagame, which in the US would be your top club teams, probably your top 10 club teams, and your MLQ teams, you can really expect idealistic athleticism, skills, and game knowledge. So you can expect that every player has played a lot, that they're athletic, that they have Quidditch skills, and that they have Quidditch game knowledge. And that means you can really do idealistic things, right? Like, if you see the compact defense, you can run all these passes because you have every person on your team can throw a pass. You can run the shooting drill because you have shooters amongst all your ball carriers. You can do things intermingled with your beaters because your beaters kind of have that sense of paying attention to the quaffle game, etc. Now, in the novice metagame, you can expect a less physical meta. Most teams aren't as good at tackling, maybe not even as athletic overall. You can expect there to be more roster holes to exploit. So what I'm saying is that a lot of these plays I was running is like, oh yeah, as long as this team can zip 3 passes to each other, this zone just crumbles. There's a lot of teams in any league, specifically novice leagues, where those 3 passers aren't available on every line. Some people just haven't gotten that throwing motion down, those throwing skills down, and that limits what you can do. There's roster holes. And finally, less complex concepts. A lot of these kind of novice metas are less practice metas, less game knowledge metas, so you have to use kind of more basic concepts to make that work. So how does this all fit into compact defense? Well, I guess I was talking with Jay Holmes, and who was on that video that you should have watched already by now if you're watching my companion video to it, and he was saying, the UK, especially at that novice metagame level, is not very physical. They really struggle with tackling. And that's number one. And number two, there's not that much passing in that meta, so it's a drive-heavy meta. And when you combine those two things, that all the other teams doing against you is trying to drive, right? It's not a passing-heavy, shooting-heavy. And you're not very good at tackling on those drives. This compact defense makes all the sense in the world. We're going to stack all of our players so that your ball carrier can't drive through our whole team and score. And you know what? If you can use any of the concepts that I just broke down to score instead, then that's great for you. Maybe not really in the novice meta. Maybe you're actually in the elite meta. But if you're not, hey, we can shut you down. And we can get more stops than we otherwise would, even if there's no bludgers, etc., etc., etc. So that's why this proliferated. And Holmes was saying that amongst top teams in the UK, this is almost completely gone. When I started this, and one of the reasons I reached out to him is that I was looking through Team UK film, and I'm saying they're playing a different defense than this. It's their version of a 2-2, which I believe that channel is going to be breaking down later in the week, so definitely check that video out. I might do another companion video once I've kind of seen it in action and seen it described. But yeah, so their high-level teams aren't playing that. Their elite metagame doesn't play compact defense. This is part of their novice metagame. Now you might be saying, Ethan, I'm an American. Why do I care about all this? And I think it's really that the entire concept of the use of this compact zone speaks more to a general idea of strategy in Quidditch. And that it's that when it comes to preparing in Quidditch, it's your responsibility to always know what you're getting into, right? What your team does, what the teams you're going to be playing do. So in the U.S., for a lot of colleges, it'd be like teams in your conference. For the clubs, it would be like the 10 other teams that are competing for a national title, right? MLQ, the teams in your division, and then if you're really at the top of your division, maybe the teams that are at the top of the other divisions that you might be competing with a championship for. Based on all this, you need to be using defensive strategies that counter the things your teams in your meta do well, and use offensive strategies that counter the defenses that teams in your meta game play. So what do I mean by that? If the teams in your metagame, all they can do is drive, nobody in your conference can throw a single pass, then hey, maybe use compact defense. I don't like it as a defense because for all the reasons I just showed, it's easy to break down. But if the teams that you're playing regularly can't do those things, hey, run compact defense. Make them prove that they can beat that, and then maybe try something else. And on the opposite side, make sure you're prepping for the right defenses on offense. So if you're in college right now and you want to compete, everybody's playing 2-2. So your team needs to have preparation for that. You can look at our video from last month. Nick Jablonski breaks down Breaker, the play that Tufts initiates, and I think it's a great play to use against 2-2 defenses that any team can really learn. Use time on that. But if nobody in your conference plays a 2-2, then maybe work on a pick and roll system or some drive and dish systems against man defenses, because that's what you're going to be realistically running. And everyone has limited practice time, so you need to be maximizing that practice time to initiate systems that are going to give you the best chance to win. And then finally, my last point is that strategies themselves are not inherently bad. Using them in the wrong situations makes them bad. Compact defense is not inherently a bad strategy. As Jay was saying, it's used a lot in the lower tiers of the UK where physicality is less so and passing less so. It's used a lot at fantasy tournaments where it's easy to implement. Everybody kind of knows how it works, and the fantasy tournaments have always been drive-heavy metas, right? So it's the same anywhere you use it. If we're in the drive and dish meta of UT last year or the drive meta of Hassan Ashkar and UR 2 years ago, then you maybe compact even works. Maybe it's not a bad defense against those things. But if we're in a pass-heavy meta, right, we're in a club meta where everybody can just zip passes all over the field, I think this strategy is a disaster waiting to happen. So, with all that said, thank you everybody so much for listening. I'd love to hear your questions. I know the concepts I touched on today are a little bit more advanced than some of the things I've been saying. So if you have questions, please put them in the comments below. Happy to answer them. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Everybody, thank you so much for watching, and have a good one.